Welcome to season 3 of Raising Joyful and Resilient Black Children. We're thrilled to continue conversations about parenting, child well-being, and social justice while offering tools and research that truly matter to our community.
That's right, Valerie. So this season, we're covering various topics, and we're especially excited to dedicate several episodes to exploring Black families' cultural and nutritional needs. This important series is made possible thanks to the Beyond Diet and Exercise grant from the Frederick County Health Department.
Indeed. And so to kick off this conversation, we're joined by an incredible guest, Tasha Manigo-Bizzell, who's very busy, a licensed dietitian nutritionist, a certified nutrition specialist, and owner of Muse Wellness. Tasha, welcome to the show. Keep us healthy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's start with your journey. What inspired you to focus your work on the cultural and nutritional needs of Black families? Like, how does Muse Wellness support this mission?
So my journey started a long, long time ago. Obviously, I'm Black, so I identify as Black. And I grew up in a very traditional family. My family is Southern American. My parents are from the Carolinas. And I grew up in New York with all those Southern values, and food, faith, culture, legacy, history was all a part of that. And so every gathering was around food. Every gathering was about celebration. And so as I grew up and, hearing the stories of how my parents grew up and their friend circles, it was really instilled in me that we could not forget that. And so now here I am in my 50s, and obviously, family members pass on. Even my own mother passed away not too long ago. It was very important to pass those stories on. But then there was another part of that. With watching my family members die, honestly, from things that were they had a nutritional basis, it was really important for me to make sure that the food component, we kind of identified that and examined that a little bit further. So one of the things that really bothered me was this idea that soul food, our food was unhealthy. And we know that that is not accurate at all. So what I do with Muse Wellness is I try to change the narrative about food and culture and put aside any of that stuff about, soul food is bad for you. Certainly, it's been changed a bit from how it started. It's been adulterated. But I want to get back to the natural, the healthy, the holistic side of that. So what I do through Muse is really combining not just food, not just diet, but this holistic view of what family is, what culture is, how that all plays into it. When you look at a person, everybody knows that, broccoli is probably healthy for you. I make the case for the apple pie. I make the case for the sweet potato pie because it fits into that story that we're constantly wanting to keep out there. Because as our loved ones die, who's going to be left to tell the story? And if you look around you, everything in the stores, it's dead food. There's no life. And we're pumping our kids full of dead food. And listen, I am all for fast food when it fits. But at the same time, you have kids that don't recognize something like asparagus, or they don't know, that that's cabbage. I was in the store recently and this is an adult, who did not know the difference between cabbage and lettuce. So I said, we need to have more conversation about this. So I am trying my best to make sure that the conversation gets back to sort of these old ways of eating that should never have gone out of style, but they have for whatever reason. But I'm trying to bring that back. So definitely keeping culture alive, keeping heritage alive, keeping family alive is my focus.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful. All of that, putting it together. Actually, my father's from South Carolina. So shout out to the Carolina over here. And he was definitely part of that great migration generation.
Yes.
And brought with him all the foods that he would eat. But in addition to bringing those foods, we would have gardens. I live in a large urban city, but we had gardens. He would teach us how to use leaves for mulch. And once I bought my first home, he was right in the backyard with me planting those what they call bean poles. So it totally makes sense. And there's some things I'm going to leave that alone, Dad, but I loved and appreciated gardening as a young person, gardening with my dad in my first home. And now I carry that tradition along with my daughter. We garden, but we grow flowers and we grow vegetables. So absolutely missing from the conversation when you think about fast foods, when we think, as you said, about the commodified soul food, which might be, like a fried chicken or so, overly sweet potato pie. So I like to hear, and we'd like to hear, I'm curious really about how do you make the case for apple pie, right? We have all of the information that does that African-American children are being diagnosed younger and younger with diabetes. So how do you make the case for an apple pie, given what the statistics are, how they're associated with, the 95 percentile BMI, how they're associated with overweight, and then really being into the space of diabetes very young. So how do you make the case for a sweet potato pie or apple pie?
That is a great question. And I do want to point out, my mother grew collard greens in our backyard in Brooklyn with concrete slab in the middle and then dirt on the side. So you can grow your own food anywhere.
I'm telling you.
But
that's right.
Yes. So the case for the apple pie or the sweet potato pie is just this: cooking it yourself, baking it yourself, using real food. Sugar is not the demon that we think it is. And certainly I'm not telling anybody that you need to have pie or cake or dessert every single night. Actually, in my house, we have dessert nights and we have treat days. So dessert night,
that makes sense.
I've let my girls pick, dessert night. If they want to pick 2 nights out of the week, they can. But usually it's 1 night or 2, no more than that. And then a treat day. So Sunday is usually treat day. And what that looks like is Sunday would be the day if you wanted pizza or if you did want, something that you wouldn't normally eat during the week. That was the day that you could do it. Now, that doesn't mean you eat from sunup to sundown, all those treats. You pick one thing that you're looking forward to. Now, as far as the pies, for instance, if you've never watched an old Southern woman make sweet potato pie from scratch, you're missing out on a treat. They knew everything that went into it. They sourced all of their ingredients. Nowadays, we go to the freezer section and then you look at the ingredient label and it is full of things you cannot pronounce. And even if you could pronounce it, I dare anybody to go to their own cabinets and see if you have those ingredients. What was in a sweet potato pie?
Right.
Sweet potatoes, vanilla, real vanilla, some sugar. Yes, you had sugar. You had real butter, not margarine and not all this other stuff that people are using. And maybe you put a little bit of flour, depending on how you grew up. But that was pretty much it. Maybe a little bit of salt to balance the sugar, but that was it. The flip side of that, if you go to, and I'm not going to mention the name of the fast food restaurant, but they used to fry their apple pies. Now they bake them. The ingredients are not so simple.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I encourage people, cook for themselves, eat real food, and then do it in moderation. Everything in moderation, including moderation.
I think that's so important. A few things you said, and if you could just help us and our listeners to understand before we kind of dig in a little bit more to all do with Muse Wellness. So Tasha, you have said dead food. What is dead food? Help our listeners understand what's dead food, because you went from dead food to talking about cooking at home. And then I will also follow up with that and say, okay, how do you make time to cook from home? Right. So let's start with, what is dead food? How does someone recognize dead food?
Okay, first and foremost, I like how Michael Pollan puts it, and he does documentaries on food. He writes about food and nutrition and holistic living, but he says, don't eat anything incapable of rotting. So if it cannot rot, it is a dead food already. Okay. So when you go into the grocery store, all of those aisles, those foods in those aisles, they're lacking one very critical thing, and that's water. So none of us can live without water. We can go for some time without food, but we cannot go without water for very long. So when you're looking at food, you really want to look at how juicy is this food. When I'm working with somebody and they're trying to alter their diets, look at your plate. How much juice is in that food? How much water is in that food? So right off the bat, you're looking at how much water, what's the water content in the food? Then you want to look at, are there enzymes in that food? Is there something alive in that food? The live food is on the outskirts of the grocery store. So your fruits and vegetables, now, let me go back. Beans are good for you because if you add water to them, you could actually sprout beans and turn it into a whole plant. So you're looking at things that have the capability of turning into a food that will nourish you. and I'm going to step on toes, and I love pasta, although pasta does not love me. In and of itself, pasta doesn't do anything for you. Yes, you can add water to it and you plump it up, but it really doesn't do anything for you. So I want people to just start looking at what are the foods that have nutrients, but they have enzymes. They are capable of rotting. Those are the foods you want to eat. Not when they rot, but certainly before that happens. But that's what we're speaking of. And again, it's not to take anything away from anybody, because to tell somebody that they're never, ever going to have their favorite thing, you're setting them up for failure. From a health standpoint, from a goal setting standpoint, a lot of people that I see want to lose weight, or we're getting into the warmer months, so everybody wants to take their clothes off and look halfway decent. That's not going to happen if you tell them right off the bat, hey, you can never eat ice cream again. You can never have those treats that your grandmother made for you. You're going to a family reunion. You can never have your aunt's famous whatever dish that is. So I want people to understand that there's sort of a give and take here. It's 80% of the time I'm doing the right thing. 20% of the time I'm doing something that might feel a little bit better for my soul. And really, that is the essence of soul food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. And so just a few things you said. I love this idea of juicy being a good thing, right? So is it
yes.
have a lot of water content? Is it juicy, right? That's going to provide us.
Yes.
Are the enzymes there to help us break down our food? So I love that. And this idea that soul food is really to nourish us in a particular way. So I love hearing that. And then this, I just also want to follow up when you mentioned, speaking with young people as well as adults who couldn't distinguish between lettuce and cabbage. And I know there was a time when, the Food and Agriculture Department created an entire curriculum called Food, Land, and People. So Food, Land, and People is an entire curriculum. The book is about 1.5 inch thick to help young people, we use it with adults as well, understand that our food doesn't just come from the supermarket. So it's not just that the fresher food is on the outer rim of the supermarket, but that's not where food comes from, right? Food from a farm, food comes from the ground, and really helping to distinguish a bean is something that can sprout versus a cracker. So this idea. And really, when we think about the disconnect for, as you mentioned, your family is from the South, and this idea that was a culture that moved with generations that we've gotten away from. So this idea of connecting soulfully and culturally, to your point, with what was a part of our culture and what nourished us, and that can keep us more moving toward a healthier track. So those are a few of the tidbits that I've heard. So the soil and land, right? This idea of, is it juicy? Is it watery? Can you pronounce it? Does it rot? Let's see where it gets there. And also, like, as you mentioned, this idea of connecting our culture, just honoring that tradition of cooking from scratch and watching those family members and then enjoying that food, right? So how do we make time for that? And Sharita, you might want to answer that. How do we make time to cook from scratch?
I'm still trying to figure it out. So two things, like, honestly, so Tasha, my mom actually is a dietitian. So we grew up, like, everything that you're saying is right on. And I have to admit that what you're talking about, I just, as a parent, I need tips on what happens on long days working. And
I need tips too.
Things are fast, like, it's fast, right? And I need to get this done so I can get back. We sort of meet this deadline, so really how to, like, balance that in a way. And then even building on what you said, like explaining the dead food, because I know if I don't get to it in enough time, it's going to spoil. And then I'm just back to square one again. So can you give us tips on how to survive? Like,
sure.
Just to be real with the audience, like, that balance is a real thing.
So, for many years, I struggled to, have enough time in the day and for anything, not just cooking, but for anything. And I got to the point where, like everything else that we do for work, it had to translate over to my home life. You have to plan it. You have to put it on the calendar. So I now plan baths. And everybody in my house knows if this is bath night or if this is, I got to practice my yoga, I put it on my calendar. I practice doing that for myself. And I have 3 daughters, so they're watching me. And if I don't get this right, then they become adults who don't know how to prioritize their needs. So really, we have to turn cooking for ourselves, prepping food, all of that as a way to nourish ourselves and to prioritize our health needs. Other than that, you're never going to do it.
Now, what does prepping though look like for you?
So prepping looks like
take me through a week, like when you start,
So on the side of my refrigerator is a grocery list. And everybody in my house knows that if you're running out of something or if there's something that you have a taste for, write it on that list. We go grocery shopping. Now, I actually like going grocery shopping, but my oldest daughter loves going grocery shopping. So you know what? You have to delegate responsibilities if you can. If you cannot, then again, you prioritize, what time makes the most sense for me to be able to do this? One thing that people don't realize, and this might be a plug for eating more plant-based, even though I am a meat eater, but as I get older, I can't really digest it as well as I used to. So that just happens as you get older. And I don't even have a taste for it as much. But one thing that people don't realize, it takes a lot longer to cook meat than it does vegetables. So you can quickly saute vegetables. You can quickly saute pretty much anything that doesn't require long cooking times. So what's long cooking times? Beans, meat, those things require a lot longer prep time and cook time. But if you are a meat eater, if you are somebody who likes fish takes less time to cook than meat. So what I tend to do, particularly after the kids are wherever they are, I may have a night where I'm watching my favorite TV show and I'm seasoning meat or I'm seasoning fish for the next day. And then whoever gets home first, if I get home the last person, and I usually get home roughly around 5:15, 5:30. Well, my kids have usually gotten home a lot earlier than me. So usually about 3:30, 4 o'clock. If there's something that takes a long time to cook, I can call my kids, hey, put that in the oven, 350, so that by the time I get home, it's halfway done. Vegetables, again, don't take very long. I would tell people you will have to learn how to cook. And people who don't cook or can't cook, learn. You have to, because then that's when you rely on everybody else to cook your food. Again, I'm not against people going out to eat. I love Indian food. I don't cook Indian food at home. So I have to go to the restaurant and get carry out. Sure. But having a list of foods that you like and that you can cook quickly, one of my best tips is learn how to roast. So you cut up onions, leeks, if you're into, mushrooms, I like the hearty root vegetables. You cut up all this stuff, you put it in the oven, your nose tells you when it's done. That's an easy win. You serve that with a little bit of brown rice, you've got a meal. Yeah. People don't realize that something like a potato has all the amino acids that you need, all the essential amino acids in a potato. You can cut that up, have that roasting, ready to go. You do have to know good, better, best. So potato, for instance, and I was just having this conversation with my oldest daughter. She cut out starches for Lent. And I was talking to her because she's really sluggish and really feeling tired. It's like, add the red potato. It's okay. Really? But I gave up potatoes. But see the difference between a red potato and a white potato, or a purple potato and a white potato, less starch, more fiber. That's what you need to get that energy back and to feel full and to not want to have homicidal episode in the house, because that's what happens when we get hungry and we're tired and all
grumpy.
You're grumpy. You're usually not eating the right food, so you're getting a combination of the foods that really work for you.
We say
but
we hangry.
Have to. Hangry. And there's a lot of hangry people. But you know what? A lot of those hangry people actually eat a fair amount of food. They're just eating food that does nothing for them.
Well, so, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Really, really good tips. And so I want to talk more about the Beyond Diet and exercise grant that you received. And so can you share more about your role in the Beyond Diet and Exercise grant? And then what specific contributions are you making to help achieve the program's goals?
So overall, my role is about education. And I see myself as part Mythbuster / guidance counselor. So going back to the families that will be served through this grant, many of them, it's not that they don't know how to do something if you give them the tools to do it, but they may need a little bit of education of how to do it in the way that it best suits their family. Okay, so let's go to the person who does know how to cook. Great. What are you cooking? Are you cooking foods that are going to push the needle in the healthy side as opposed to these constant I'm tired, I'm sluggish, I don't feel well. I mean, and so many of us walk around like that, and we don't realize the connection between food and mood. Okay. So education is the big umbrella piece, but then more specifically is helping people navigate those myths. There's a lot of misinformation out here. Everybody on Facebook I call them Facebook nutritionists. If I have one more person who asks me about, well, what if I have a glass of apple cider vinegar and won't that help me digest my food? It's like, it will burn your esophagus. And how about let's turn the apple cider vinegar into a really good vinaigrette or a really good salad dressing?
Yeah.
How about let's start there? Stop taking shots of apple cider vinegar unless you like the burning esophagus feel. There's so much misinformation. There's so much information that is contrary to what you learned over here. So then people just start to feel overrun, overburdened, overwhelmed with all of it. And then they just say, you know what, to heck with it. I'm just going to go back to that restaurant that treats me well and gives me a $5 meal deal. So would I come in and say, no, let's take it back to the beginning. Let's look at your plate. How should your plate be divided? Well, half your plate, vegetables. What is a vegetable? And then sometimes it does get to be that nitty gritty because we're talking about parents who have school-age children, 0 to 6 is what this grant is mostly focusing on, but that doesn't mean they don't have older children. So getting them to understand, let's plant the seeds early. So I come along and I say, look, let me show you how easy this can be. Let's start looking at what does your family like to eat? And because this grant is also focused on that cultural component, tell me about your family. Tell me about what you all like. Well, I grew up eating this and I really don't want to give that up. Okay, let's flip the script. Let's talk about some food swaps. Let's talk about alternative ways of cooking that. A perfect example is, my mother was a fabulous Southern cook. She also deep fried bacon once, but she refused to admit that she did that. But she was famous for her candied yams. Okay, so I know how to make my mama's candied yams. And I always tell people when they ask me, teach me the recipe. What's the recipe? There is no recipe for candied yams. You literally have to watch somebody make it. And then you have to turn away when they start putting the sugar on it.
Oh, no.
Okay? Because you're making candy. You're making a syrup.
Yes.
You're making caramel. Well, I learned and I taught myself how to get that taste without all of the sugar. I mean, I saved that for Thanksgiving. But during the week or, a couple of times a month, if I want roasted sweet potatoes, I can create that taste. It tastes like candy yams, but half the fat, half the sugar, but all of the flavor. So it's really taking people's ancestral foods and telling them, no, it's not bad, but here's how we can make it better for you so you can enjoy it more. And then you can live longer with your family enjoying these flavors. It's really about capturing flavor. So again, it's getting people in the kitchen. It's getting them to bring their kids into the picture because beyond diet and exercise, the beyond part is the children. It's this next generation. And I am really scared for this next generation when we're talking about childhood obesity rates being just off the charts. There was a time when, a 3-year-old was a little thing. Now a 3-year-old can look the size of a grown person because of all the excess weight they're carrying. I had a child a couple of years back that I was working with. He was 4 years old and he was 120 pounds. And the mom was oblivious to what was going on. But he doesn't go to the fast food restaurants. He can't drive. He cannot cook for himself. So you are literally putting something in front of him. He is eating it. And I grew up in a time where if you didn't finish your plate, guess what? You didn't get dessert. You didn't get Kool-Aid and you couldn't go out and play. So you had to finish everything on your plate. That mentality has not gone anywhere. We passed that down. So instead of having children being able to listen to themselves and listen to the fact that my tummy is full, I'm satisfied, the parents are often pushing this idea that you have to finish your plate. So we have to reconfigure how people think about what it means to be healthy, what it means to be well fed, what it means to be nourished, and that you're not a bad parent if there are leftovers.
Can we talk about that? I want to talk about some of the challenges that parents may have in terms of finding culturally relevant foods or making adjustments, but some of that come from a place of lack, right? And so, I can certainly recall people saying, there are kids starving. People don't have as much. So you single thing on your plate, right?
So you guilt the children into, right. I don't want anybody to starve.
I mean, so also that was food that my mom cooked at home versus food that we from a fast food restaurant, Yes. But I do want to talk about, like, how do you help in a way that is celebratory, or also just acknowledging like that's a tradition that we can adjust, right? Because we know that that's something that tradition has been passed on. And even with my daughter, I really work hard to say when you're full. So I think one of the questions I have is, how do you help your children to know when they're full? Because as you said, there's dead food, we empty calories where you're just going to eat. You don't feel full. So how do you help a young person to know whether they're 3 or 13, hey, my body is telling me I'm full versus eating a full bag or getting 2 Happy Meals or whatever they're eating. So I think that's an important question. One, what kinds of conversations do you have with parents in a way that they don't feel guilty about, and that they have an aha moment about, oh, I learned this from my parents or grandparents, and how do parents pay attention, as well as how do parents and guardians teach their children to know when they are full?
What you just said is that paying attention. So first of all, it's how do we structure the meal times, particularly dinner. I know breakfast and lunch, especially if children are in school, then they're going to be at school at lunch.
Yep.
And breakfast can be a little bit challenging because everybody's moving. But dinner time is the time that we need to take back. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm tired. I just want to take my food upstairs and watch Will Trent. And my kids are, they go off to their rooms. So we've started incorporating back, no, let's sit down at the table. Let's sit down at the table. Let's ask questions. And, as you're having conversation, you don't eat as much. And I encourage people to pay attention to that. If you go to a fast food restaurant, my background is in marketing. If you go to the average fast food restaurant, notice the color scheme that they use. They use a lot of colors that make you rush. And they also serve you very huge portion sizes. So if you sit down to eat in a restaurant in a fast food environment, the color scheme already is making you rush. And then you're constantly shoveling food in your mouth. Of course, you have these big portion sizes. And before you know it, you'll finish your meal in about 10 minutes. It doesn't take that long. Whereas if you're home and you're having good conversation and you're finding out how everybody's day is, well, you're sitting at the dinner table laughing and talking. And now dinner is an hour and a half long, but you're relaxed. So the state of mind in which you eat determines how full you feel, how quickly you get full, or it's not even about feeling full, it's about feeling satisfied. So what I would tell parents to do, and this is something they're going to have to start doing with themselves first. You can't teach it to your kids until you know how to do it yourself. Check in with yourself as you're eating. You know what? How do I feel? Do I want any more food? Am I still hungry? And if you're hungry, fine, eat. But ask yourself the question, am I hungry or do I just want this? And we do this a lot with food that we enjoy. So pizza and desserts and cookies and things like that. We don't typically ask ourselves that question, but I want us to, because it's okay to acknowledge, you know what, I'm not really hungry, but I really do want this cookie. So then you make a deal with yourself. That's where those dessert nights and treat days come in. Because if I know that Thursday is dessert night and I'm starting to feel a little bit, hungry or a little bit interested in that cookie, if I know dessert night is Thursday, I might start going, you know what, I can wait till Thursday. And then I look forward to it on Thursday. And I tell people all the time, no matter what it is you eat, make a big production about it. If you're going to eat the cookie, enjoy the cookie. Don't just shovel it in your mouth. Pay attention to the cookie. Get comfortable. Get cozy. Get your glass of milk. Get whatever you need, whatever accoutrements you need, and then enjoy that cookie and let that be it. But don't take the bag of cookies. Look at the serving size. Serving size is huge because, even you have to get a little common sense about that too. And again, you have to teach that to your kids when they're of age and they can understand this. My kids now, they'll look at a serving size. If it doesn't make sense, don't eat it. So if the serving size for some cookies is 10 cookies. Well, if they're little cookies, maybe that's not such a big deal. But if the serving size is this big old cookie, and you eat 2 of those big old cookies,
it had all your calories for the day. Right?
You have to start asking yourself. But something that I like to do is, particularly with families, is letting parents off the hook. Dessert is not a bad word, but how about there is no rule that says dessert has to come after dinner? Dessert could come after lunch. And actually, dessert is better for you after lunch because then you don't have those sugar spikes late into the evening, making you crash and burn and then get up and crave sugar all over again. Your body is very, very smart. So getting people to understand your body's smarter than you. But one of the things about your body is it always wants to protect you. So I know that I have to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. My body knows that too. How does it wake you up? You start craving sugar. First thing in the morning, all those people that say, I can't do anything until I have my cup of coffee, they're not talking about black coffee. They're talking about cream and sugar and vanilla mocha and all of that and big venti sizes. That's not what's ideal if you want long-term health. And again, your kids are watching you. Mommy always needs her cup of coffee first thing in the morning. She always has to go to that special coffee shop and get that big cup of coffee because she can't function. They hear all of this. They're little parakeets. They hear it. They're little recorders. And then when they grow up, and I saw this when I was in high schoolers getting coffee first thing in the morning. What is so stressful about a 15-year-old's life that they need to start it with a cup of coffee? We're teaching them that. We're teaching them how to be stressed, but we can teach them how to flip the script. So what I want all families to do is watch your language, but watch what you do and how you do it. Start with eating dinner. I won't go for the other two because, again, we're not usually home at those other times.
Sure.
But start eating dinner at home. Start eating dinner at the table with your family. Start having conversation and start getting your kids involved in the process. So you don't have time to do it. All right, that's okay. But maybe bring the kids into the kitchen anyway.
Yeah, those are all really good ideas. And so you've mentioned a couple different sort of dietary checklists. So coffee, you've gone from coffee to red potatoes to sweet potatoes, and that's all right. And some people may say that's a lot of starch and carbs, but I do want to ask, for those of us who know the historic legacy of Americans and those who were also part of that Great Migration, that starch is like a heavier food and less expensive. So many across the African diaspora, if it's not rice, it's cornbread. If it's not cornbread, it's potatoes, right? And it may or may not be doctored up and candy sweet.
Yeah.
But that leads me to ask you, how can African-American or Black parents get a culturally relevant nutritional advice, right? Because what you're saying is, I'm not going to knock you over the head because of the kinds of foods you like. I'm going to encourage you to eat them a different way. So how can these parents get culturally relevant nutritional advice? And what are some of the barriers to getting that advice?
Well, first of all, there's lack of understanding about what those foods are that we used to eat in abundance. Okay. So I've seen this over and over again. We eat the same 10 to 12 foods over and over again. We have to expand the palate, for one. So that means getting educated about food. So the next time you go to the grocery store, now this is going to be a little tricky depending on where you shop. We know that right now with the economy the way it is, a lot of these sort of smaller chain stores are opening up, but they don't have as big a variety as some of your larger grocery stores. So right there is going to be a little bit of a challenge because you're going to see the same vegetables. But you know what? If that's where you shop, go down the aisles. What foods have you never tried? I want people to start expanding their culinary choices and really getting other things on their plate. And one of the things, and I'll kind of go back to this, but one of the things I want people to do is don't get caught up in, maybe you had an experience with it a long time ago and, I don't like that. We're going to get that. We're going to clean slate it. Go down the aisle. If you've never had an asparagus, if you've never seen it, never cooked it, you know what? YouTube is great for this. When I was in college, that's when all those shows started coming on. So the Rachel Rays and the Milk Streets and all that, these sorts of celebrity chefs were all the rage. Watch, learn from people. And with Maryland Public Television is a great, great resource. I watch cooking shows sun up to sundown. It's like my football. I look at how they cook things, their techniques, spices that they use. We've got to get ourselves educated on things beyond salt and pepper. There's a whole world out there. So I would tell people, first of all, let's get out of our comfort zone and start exploring, and take your kids with you as you're exploring. Stop saying yuck. Adults, they ruin everything when they immediately say, ooh. And then you say, well, have you ever had that? Well, no, but I don't think I would like it. No, because your kids hear that and then they won't try it. My mother, again, she was a great cook, but I remember when I was little, she made Brussels sprouts. And I think she only made it once or twice, but I recall she boiled them and she boiled them whole. And it was the most disgusting thing.
Now, you know, that was so yummy. Tell the truth.
No, it was not.
I remember.
But as I got older, again, I'm watching my shows, I'm reading cookbooks, I'm looking at things, and pictures make everything look beautiful. I started cooking them myself, and I started roasting them, and then I started adding fresh garlic.
So good.
And sauteing
cracked pepper.
And yes.
Oh my God.
And now I absolutely love Brussels sprouts.
Oh, true story. I used to eat raw Brussels sprouts for snack at lunch when I was in elementary school. But my classmates didn't like the smell, so my teacher wrote a note to my mom and said, "Please don't her."
Look what happened.
But I got the same. Yeah, I have the same story as Tasha. Hated Brussels sprouts. That's the way my mom cooked them. When I actually went to a restaurant, and I was like, "Well, let me try." Somebody else ordered them, and I was like, "Let me try." And I have never went back. They are so good.
They're good.
So good.
That was my story with okra. My mom would cook okra till it was slimy. And I was like, I will never.
Oh,
now here's the thing about okra. And this
I
is
love
something.
okra, but I don't like the whole slimy.
I couldn't deal with it. But then my friend's mother said, no, you make it with diced tomatoes and corn. I love okra now, but when my mom made it, I sat at that table until I fell asleep. I was not going to.
Now, here's the thing with those sorts of foods. My rule in my house is you don't have to like it. You have to try it.
Yes.
But I encourage people, you have to try it 3 times, preferably cooked 3 different ways.
Okay.
That's
so
fair.
That way, you may not like it boiled, but you might like it roasted. You may like it sauteed. You may like it, even flash fried or what have you. And I do that with my kids. And I've done it when they were little. And after a while, you discover what people like. Everybody's not going to like everything. So I do have my oldest. She does not like okra. She is all about Southern cooking and Southern cuisine. I said, you can't get your Southern cook card if you can't stand okra. And she's like, oh, I've got a child who does not like asparagus. I have one who doesn't like Brussels sprouts. I've got one who doesn't like chocolate. But this is after they've tried it several times.
Right.
And so I respect that. But they have to try it several times. They have to try it different ways. Once they just don't like it.
I like that.
And then we respect that.
Right.
But the thing about having them prepare foods with me is even a food that they don't particularly care for, whenever you cook something, when your kids cook with you, they will try it.
Sure.
So all of that, I don't like that. Help me make it. And then and then you can pass down those stories.
You can pass down the stories and learn to cook. And certainly when they're younger, you can teach math and science really, because my daughter is younger, and I may have shared this on another episode, and she loves, for whatever reason, to bake and makes egg roll in a bowl. But baking requires a lot of measurement.
Yes.
You have an auntie,
a lot of fractions,
who doesn't use a recipe. And we would do that. Okay, how much is a half cup? Get the cup out. So we take that into when we cook in that way from a recipe that requires measurement. We definitely include, she's in elementary school, we include the measurement, and we talk about, well, how many quarters in a cup?
Yes.
So we do that. So you can get a 2-for-1. And I will have to admit, like Sharita just being busy, as you said as well, we might only get to do that once or twice a week, but we do it with intention. And so for our listeners, you may not be able to do this every day. It may sound impossible, but I have actually found that when I cook with my daughter during those times, not only is she learning to cook, which is a survival skill, which people right now are probably wishing they knew how to cook with those prices. But secondly, it gives us a chance to talk about flavors and, where things go and why it's important, and paying attention also to the temperature that we're cooking and the kinds of pots and pans. So it gives us a chance to extend the conversation. So although she's not a teenager, which is the group I study, sometimes I can't get much out of her other than it was fine, Mom. So when we're cooking, I can test her math skills and we can talk a little bit more. So it can become that type of family bonding that we don't get during a weekday, where we're trying to rush out the door to school, get home and hurry up and eat and get ready for school the next day. For sure.
And you mentioned something too with flavor profiles. Again, if you have to eat because you're limited in what you can buy, having different flavor profiles that you can pull from and having different spices and seasoning blends that you can make your own. You don't have to pay all this money for seasoning blends if you buy the individual spices, but it can now transport you. So now over here, I'm having something that has more of a Mexican flair. My kids tell me I culturally appropriate all the time. It's like, what culture are we appropriating tonight? It's like, oh, we're going to the Middle East. And they tease me. It's like, oh, you added turmeric. I'm like, yes, I did. But it's exposing them now because they're going to be adults that if you take them out to dinner and all they order are chicken nuggets and French fries, and listen, I'm not going to disparage people for the chicken nuggets and French fries, but if that's all your children eat, that's all they'll want to eat. So I encourage people to get out of that comfort zone, to explore, to experiment within reason, and expose your children, but expose yourselves first. So if you yourself don't feel like, hey, I don't know what my cultural foods are, I don't know how to cook them, the library, go to the library, it's free. You can stay all day and you can learn and then talk to people. I was blessed because I did grow up in New York. I was the only one of Southern descent in New York. I grew up, my friends were from Jamaica and Panama and Trinidad and Tobago and just all over the place. And sharing those food stories with them and then eating at their homes, I came to Maryland with this rich palette and I'm looking for, well, where can I find this? Where can I find that? And initially when I first got here, it was a lot of blank stares. Like, what is that? What are you talking about? I was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to make this work? But now all these years later, there are specialty stores cropping up and you can find the Latin market and you can find all these different flavors and foods that I could get back there, but now they're available here. And I think that's very important for people to feel that they can buy their foods, their native foods, and that they can still have them even though they're not in their native land. I'm still trying to find Carolina grits, real grits, not this stuff that, takes 5 seconds to cook. But alas, I'm on a journey. And you mentioned before about the starches. Our food was definitely heavy in starch, if you will, because there was a lot of beans and legumes and things like that. But what people don't talk about or they pass over was lots of greens, lots of leafy vegetables, a lot of non-starchy vegetables, and a lot of non-GMO foods.
Right.
So,
right.
And of course, they grew their own.
Thank you.
And so, Tasha, thank you for sharing with us already. And so you've emphasized the importance of integrating cultural traditions into wellness practices. So why do you think that's so vital? And share an example of how you've incorporated these elements into your work or how it will be incorporated into the program as you go further.
So for me, culture is connection. It's connecting us back to our roots. It's connecting us back to family, particularly family that has now gone on. So as a descendant of enslaved Africans, when people ask, why are we still talking about this? Why must we talk about this over and over again? I put it to them this way. Imagine if I took you from your land. I took your name. I took your language. I took your family because we were all split up. I took your traditions away from you. How would you feel? So you have people who are still fighting to get back home, if you will. And certainly working with a very diverse group of people that I've worked with over the years, I'm very respectful of that. And I think if you take out the cultural piece of it, what are you left with? You're left with that dead food again. I remember when I worked for the state of Maryland, I used to work with postpartum moms and new moms and pregnant moms and a large Latina population. And so when I would be sitting down with them talking about, well, what are you eating? And let me know how you're doing. How's the food working for you? Whatever the conversation was going about food, they would always invariably, I don't care whether they consider themselves Afro-Latina or Latina, they would all say the same thing. Oh, I'm doing the 40-day diet. And I said, the 40-day what? The 40-day Latin diet. And so I wasn't familiar with this. And in talking with them, this was passed down from mom and grandmom and great grandmom and the aunties. Well, for 40 days after giving birth, they were required to eat a very restrictive diet. And basically it was like chicken soup with minimal amounts of chicken, so more like broth, tortillas and cheese, and for whatever reason, hot cocoa or hot chocolate. And this is what they would eat for 40 days. And some of the moms would tell me, listen, I know, but my abuela said, I have to do this. And so we would laugh about it because now we think we know so much and, your grandmother doesn't know anything. But it was very important for them to preserve that tradition, even though they knew it was lacking in some vital nutrients. We had to keep it. And some moms would come to me and say, no, I have to eat like this. And they were more adamant. So what I found was helpful is, listen, I'm not going to take anything away. Can we add to it? Because the same mom is sitting in front of me and she's exhausted, or she's clearly nutrient deficient, or she's struggling with something. I don't want to take that away from her because that's the connection to her family. And, sometimes, my grandmother passed away and I just feel like I need to do this. I want to add to that. So we talked about ways we can keep her within the confines of what the diet was, but also giving her what she needed, because many of them were trying to breastfeed. And, if you don't have enough nutrients, it's very hard to breastfeed. So then there's that frustration. And I would share my own story. I mean, when I had my children, my mother was very adamant about certain traditions and certain foods, and you had to eat a certain way. So I understood that. And now looking back, and my mother is now gone, I'm going to do it with my kids. Even though I know there is no reason to wrap your stomach like that or put the 50-cent piece on the baby's belly button, but I'm doing it because
it's the culture.
It's the culture.
And it's the culture.
And it will remind me of her. So those are just small examples of how we have to acknowledge and pay homage to the ones who've come before us. We can always make things better, but we don't want to erase it. And I think that's what many people of color feel about our heritage, especially about our food, is being erased. And I remember having a conversation with someone and we were talking about chitlins. Well, now you can find them in very high-end restaurants that are not owned by us. So what does that mean? That means people are taking our foods and what was once seen as trash, and now they're turning it into a delicacy, but we don't own it. And that can't be. But do we understand why we were taking those pig intestines? Our people turned pig intestines and hog maws and all these things, and they made them into sustenance. So I don't want to ever erase that from people, but we can certainly add to that. We can change cooking methods. We can change spices and things like that. We can take out some of the fat, and then we can add tons and tons of vegetables, and we can still have our cultural heritage intact and make it healthier. And that's all all we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And so I'm going to move to the next question that we have for you. And so for parents tuning in, what practical tips or strategies can they start using today to foster healthier eating habits and overall wellness for their families? Like you talked a little bit about it, but if there's anything that you think, some main points that the audience should take away, what do you think that should be?
First and foremost, get them involved. I don't care how young they are. Even a toddler can take mashed banana and throw it into a bowl for you.
Absolutely.
And what I would tell parents,
they'll do it.
I was going to say,
Well, yes,
without instruction, a toddler will do that.
Exactly.
Right.
But here's the thing. Even if you are not going to use that ingredient, maybe the hands are all messy, make them think you used it. Because if they feel connected to what you're doing, they're bought in. And they are going to eat, and they're going to remember that, and they're going to take it with them. So first and foremost, involve your kids. Take them to the grocery store with you. Get their opinions as they get older. Hey, what do you feel like eating? What do you have a taste for? Get everybody involved in the communal dining experience. That's number one. Parents, educate yourselves. If your palate is kind of small and childlike, expand, expose, and maybe do it as a family. If let's say you've never tried sushi, go to the restaurant and get some sushi. Try something. You don't know what you don't like until you try something. So start expanding your repertoire, start cooking together, all of those things. And then, I still have to go back to this. get out of your food comfort bowl. You've got to start trying more things. And I want people to try a different vegetable every week, because at the base of it, we can't have just, meat heavy diets. We're dying. And my mother, unfortunately, died of congestive heart failure and coronary artery disease. And that shouldn't be happening. And I've watched many family members and friends of family just dying of things that have a nutritional component. And we can't do that anymore. Our children are, and you brought it up earlier about diabetes. Our children have diabetes now. There's an obesity epidemic. And, we've been hearing for years that this will be the first generation that might not outlive their parents. That is scary. And the help for that is within our own hands. We can do something about that. I wish everybody could grow their own food. They can't. But we can go to a farmer's market. We can find a farm. And now there are so many ways to get fresh, healthy foods on our plates. There's no excuse for it. There are so many outlets where we can exchange ideas. And that's really the thing is we stay in our own little cocoons, and that's not helpful to anybody. We're not going to push the needle forward if we stay here. I started getting outside of my comfort zone and I learned some stuff. I think that's really what it is. And we keep going back to the education piece. If we are not willing to learn, then this all stops here. But if we're watching our kids and we want them to thrive, we've got to teach them. And if we don't know, we have to learn. But now, the libraries have it. There's so many different community organizations that are doing it. This grant is about that. So certainly, I would love to see just hundreds of parents just saying, oh, teach me, because that's what this is all about. We want to teach people how to do better and how to be better so that generations to come, they're healthier, because Lord knows the governments and the powers that be, they're cutting funding. And it's really scary that parents who really are in need will soon find out that they may not have access to the resources that they once had.
Very true. And, a sobering conversation, but also some great tips and reminding us and hopefully our listeners of the connections to our culture, if it's immediate in our immediate families or the diaspora at large. So super important. I have 2 questions as we wrap up. So thanks for just sharing all the tidbits and how you modeled this at home and how you integrate that into your programming with Muse Wellness. I do want to ask, we talked a lot about food and obesity and what that looks like for young people, high blood pressure, diabetes. We also know that, in some ways we start out through puberty with that higher BMI, and that for some it used to even out, but maybe not as much. But I do want to see if you can talk a little bit about the exercise, how you integrate that in. So we heard you say, you might have a dessert night, you might have a yoga. What are ways that you integrate or in your program model for parents how to integrate physical activity? Because a lot of our young people, and as well as us, are looking at tablets or watching TV. So how do you ensure that the physical activity is there to complement, right, the better nutrition?
Well, first and foremost, we don't call it exercise because nobody wants to exercise, but everybody has to move. You have to move when you go to, from one room to the next. So first of all, calling it something other than what it really is movement, and getting people to understand that you must move. I knew a woman who actually convinced herself that, her legs didn't work and she couldn't do this, she couldn't do that. Well, ultimately her legs stopped working. And she unfortunately also died of heart-related illness, which was unfortunate because had she moved a little bit more, it would have helped mitigate some of the things that plagued her in her later years. So I am all about families doing things together. It's getting warmer now. I have a dog, so I even told my kids, listen, when you get home from school, you can take the dog for a walk. And therefore, you are now moving. But families can start moving together. My favorite movement, actually, I'm an avid hula hooper. And people don't realize how many calories you burn hula hooping, how much it works your entire body. So finding those.
I've been trying. I forgot how to hula hoop.
I retaught myself how to hula hoop.
Better.
I got to reteach myself because that's a wrong thing.
Yes, it keeps falling, but I'm going to keep trying because they say with hula hoop you can burn almost as many calories as swimming, and swimming and are 2 of the top calorie burner. So it's falling, but I'm trying.
Yep. And you know what? The best thing about hula hooping, or one of the best things, is no one can hula hoop angry. So here's that other piece, that stress piece. We've got to find ways to mitigate stress as a family. We're coming home with all kinds of things. You know, mom is coming home with this, dad is coming home with that, the kids are coming home with things. And we've got to find ways to mitigate that stress. Because again, you can eat all the salad in the world you want. You can have the most culturally appropriate diet in the world. It's so healthy for you. But if you can't stand the job, you hate school, you hate the kids, you hate the spouse, you even hate the dog, it is not going to be healthy for you in the long term. And we have to be honest about that. And I'm honest about it all the time, especially when I'm talking to younger mothers and who feel a little guilty because they're on social media and they're being mommy shamed. And I tell people all the time, I don't get mommy shamed. I'm too old for that. But here's what I will say. In all honesty, yes, I love being a mother. I love my children. Do you always like them? No. Do you always enjoy motherhood? No. That is the most honest thing you can share with other mothers and other parents, is that no, you don't always enjoy it. I didn't enjoy teaching 5th grade math to my daughter one summer. I didn't enjoy that at all. I don't enjoy, having to come home from work and make sure everybody's got their homework done. And no, you don't enjoy that. But be honest about that. And once you're honest about it, then all the other stuff can go away. And then you can acknowledge that and say, okay, now what do I need to do? I don't enjoy this thing over here. I don't enjoy trying to make dinner and I'm tired. What can I do now about that? And maybe that's the night where, ooh, this has got to be treat night. Or maybe that's the night where we do something a little bit simpler, learning those recipes that don't require a lot of time and energy. And this is where cultural foods really come in handy. I mean, I love making grilled fajitas. The simplest thing in the world to make at home, lickety split, it's done. So finding those different recipes, and really, I mean, we have social media, we have Pinterest, and everybody's posting everything they're eating. Take pictures, look at stuff. Oh, that looks good. How easy is that to make? How many ingredients? They have cookbooks now, 5 ingredient meals. So for everybody who says they don't have time, you have time to get 5 ingredients together. You do. Soup is easy, easiest thing in the world to make. It literally is pouring water into a bowl, putting a ton of vegetables and flavorings in, and you cook it down. So it's not hard. Crock pot, making friends. If you don't have a crock pot, they're fairly inexpensive, but crock pot dishes, one and done. I am a big fan of roasting things, but I'm also a big fan of one pot meals. So this is the education piece, and this is showing people what that looks like and how easy it is for them to incorporate. But that's really what's going to bring those stress levels down, especially around eating. And then, of course, then you might have more time to have those physical activities with your family. But you got to find something that you love to do.
Yes.
That's first and foremost. If you don't like the gym, then the gym is never going to be your friend.
It's not my friend, but I go there. However, we have dance parties at my house. We've been having, my daughter lost her rhythm. At one point, she was going to a non-majority. She was in a non-majority space. And we were like, this kid.
But she got it, though.
She got it back. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
But the one thing that we all have to do if we have working legs is walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So if you can do nothing else, if you don't want to do anything else, everybody can just walk if your legs work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you find, like you say, you find what you enjoy, and it's not, like you said, it's movement versus exercise. So I like the thought of that. So as we get ready to wrap, and I'm like, okay, well, at least I can move my feet while we're here recording.
Yep.
I do want to ask you, what we really like, because this is, about raising joyful and resilient Black children. What is the one joyful takeaway that you want our parents and our listeners to hear as we wrap up for this conversation tonight? What's that joy quotient that parents or guardians can do with their children? One joyful thing that you would share and say, you do this even when you're tired or you don't like to do, or you don't have a lot of time. What's that joyful thing?
I can't even believe that I'm going to share this, because I used to hate when he would do this. My husband, long time ago, if I were upset about something, I was mad about something, he would look at me and just say, now smile. And that ticked me off so much, because when you're upset, you don't want to smile. But try smiling. Find the sunshine. I tell people, I don't think people know this, but there's a week in January and it's called Hunt for Happiness Week. And as a nutritionist, as a wellness person, these are all my holidays, Hunt for Happiness Week, International Day of Happiness, even August 15th, which is my middle daughter's birthday, is the National Day of Relaxation. So I want people to hunt for the happiness, look for it, search it out, so even if as a family you say, you know what, I want everybody to find the thing that made them smile today. I want everybody, we all have phones, we all have camera phones. Take a picture of the prettiest sunset or the prettiest sunrise. We've got to find the joy outside of us and then pull that into us. Because sometimes, you're going to wake up and life isn't life in the way it needs to be. Life isn't as joyful as it needs to be. Certainly, if you're dealing with grief and loss, it can be hard to find that. But around each of us is that thing that can make us smile. And so that's what I want people to do. And I want you to teach it to your kids because, again, they are watching you. They're watching how you do this thing called life. And I know if I wake up and I'm sad, first of all, my daughters are older and they're already, keen and looking at me like, how's she doing today? But when I'm sad, it hurts them to their heart. So I want to teach them, you don't ever want to ignore your feelings. Certainly, if you're sad, you're sad. But don't stay sad in that sadness for too long, because then it starts to take over. And that sadness turns into illness so quickly. One of the things that I want everybody to understand is dis-ease is something that we can control. My definition of wellness is not merely the absence of disease. It's a manifestation of the life we've created. So everything that we do, everything that we don't do, everything we eat or don't eat, every dream deferred, discarded, or discovered, all adds into that well-lived, well-rounded life. I am in an opportunity where I can teach my children how to live better lives just by finding the bright side. Yes, there are going to be some dark clouds, but you know what? I encourage everybody, if you do nothing else, get in the car, chase a sunset to see where it ends, and then look up from where you are and see what you see.
I love that.
Might discover something new. Might even make a new friend.
Yeah, we got to, harness the joy. We should always do that. That's something that our ancestors had learned to do and continue.
They learned to do it.
Regenerate that energy and pass that on to the next generation through our behaviors, as you said, as well as the foods. So we just, Tasha, we really do want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing those insights. They're so valuable into how we can move beyond diet and exercise to really promote holistic wellness for Black families, right? This moving away from dis-ease into that space of joy and healthiness. So I'm just fully inspired. I think about it has reaffirmed for me the ways that I engage my daughter around cooking and movement. We actually have to fight for the elliptical. Anything that I bring, she's like, I want to do it first.
Get a hula hoop.
I'm going to get a hula hoop.
I just have to relearn how to hula hoop. I was like, who gets how to hula hoop? It's like forgetting how to ride a bike, right? But this has just been a really helpful conversation, reminding me to make sure that this summer we plant our vegetables as well as our flowers, remind me to really get to walking even when we're not doing other things. Because walking is the simplest thing. And then you can indeed find that joy, find that sunset. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us to think holistically and honoring our culture at the same time as we think about how to do it in a healthy way. No shame. Thank you.
No shame.
So we are Dr. Valerie Adams-Bass and Dr. Sharita Butler-Barnes. Sharita, you have anything you want to add?
Well, thank you. I mean, I've learned ways to re-engage my teenagers, right? And ways to re-engage and to bring them in and to share. And I think that's important. So it's not just starting off, but going further. So I'm a re-engage.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks so much. Again, we are Dr. Valerie Adams-Bass. Thank you, Tasha and Dr. Sharita Butler-Barnes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll see you next time on Raising Joyful and Resilient Black Children. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.